One cannot speak about any congregation in St. Vincent without the expertise, without the planning of W. Ralph Wharton. The first converts of this era really were 5 young ladies: Barbara, Gracita, and Margarita Thomas, Veline Mathis, and Cremona Samuel. After they had moved to this area, because Barbara, those girls, their mother or auntie was a nurse, and she was stationed up here in Retreat, and so that's how they were here. But these girls were going to school in Kingstown, where Ralph did his job in working on those guys from grammar school and the high school. That's how it started. It so happened that after they came to this area, and Brother Wharton sent Clayton to meet with them at the, what we call it, the round shop up the road in the back. And that's where they met for worship for a while, until these girls and their mother was transferred to the Brighton area. Again, that's how the Brighton started, because of these 3 girls in particular. And of course, Veline came with them, and Cremona as well. So the work stopped for a while, until probably later, around 69 or 70, when there was a greater move to come into this area and preach the gospel of Christ. And there was some converts. But during 1970 and 71, we were also meeting in Rillen Hill. And that was an experience that you wouldn't want to have. The Samuels, not the Samuels up here, there are 2 Samuel families that were in the church. But they met with us in Rillen Hill, while others were meeting here in Retreat. In Rillen Hill, we were doing fine. We were coming from Kingstown, worshiping, until one election time. We were meeting at a brother's house, and he said, "If you belong to the opposite party, don't come to my house no more." And that's how we decided to come to Vermont and to work. We did not establish the work here even the second time. It was here before we got here. They met at Miss Wiseman's house, that is at the downstairs. During that time, or before that, we have Claudius Davis, who is from this area. He was converted, but he actually never worshipped in this area. He worshipped in Kingstown. I think in 1970, Claudius and Bob Brown, came to our house in Kellyaqua with Winston Samuel. And we took him that night and baptized him in the ocean there in Kellyaqua. That was more or less the beginning of the good work that started in Retreat. Sam Sullen, and I think Vernon Scott has something to do with it too, but Sam Sullen will come up and worship with these people here in Retreat. That is the Samuels, the Wiseman, and some others. We moved here in 1972. And there's some things I can tell you, that there was no hill in this city or in this town that we didn't go to meet people. People knew us. There's an experience which my wife and I have had in here. To some people, it is a bad experience. To us, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. When we moved here in 72, we moved to a 3-bedroom house next to Miss Lawrence and the Wiseman. And things went well for a year until our support from the States cut. And we didn't know what to do at first, but we made some applications, went to Kingstown, and handed them out. And there was a gentleman, when he saw me come in, he said, "I knew you. You were with Mr. Wharton. He lived just across from his painter, and Mr. De Silva, and he knew us, and he gave me a job on the spot." We had to move from that house, a 3-bedroom house, to a 2-room house, not more than 300 square feet. Our little 1-year-old son, we had 1 bedroom and a living room where we cooked, and the bathroom was a very stately building on the outside. And we enjoy communing with the Lord in that little outhouse. And the people of Vermont and Retreat came to our assistance in ways we never could have imagined. Wally Brown, who Sinclair lived with, he brought to us a bottle of fresh cow milk every morning for our son. Those people who had their crops in the mountains, every time they come down, they lift their loads down at our doorstep, and we got our share. We never grew hungry. We never were in want of anything. They were not all Christians. Norma Dowers, her mother, she was one of those who helped us. We worked on her a long time. Her father, that's another case. Lord have mercy. We worked and worked and worked. Didn't succeed, but we worked. And there were people like that. The Anthonys. Mr. Anthony was always drunk, but never disrespectful. We had a guy in this town we called Crook. He was mean. He was mean. But whenever he came to me, he was never disrespectful. I could go to Crook and talk to him like no one else. What happened? Was it because I was always good? No. There was one incident that happened to me I never forget. Back in Kingstown, I had a job at Mrs. Robinson, the one who owned Lyric Theater, and that was somewhere in 67. She was paying me $1, I think $1 a day. And at the end of the week, I didn't have any money. So I went to her, and I thought I was ugly. And I told her I don't want this job anymore. First thing I did, I went to Ralph Walton's house. I said I quit the job, and he said, "How did you quit?" I told him what I did. He said, "Go on back to Mrs. Robinson and apologize." I went to Miss Robinson. She saw me coming. She said, "Are you coming for your job?" I said, "No, ma'am. I'm coming to apologize because I was not a Christian or acting like a Christian." And what Ralph Walton taught me that time, I never forgot. And it helped me all those years learning how to deal with people without being angry, without being disrespectful. And I gave him the praise for that. The work, Brother Dowers was somewhere around. He was always going between Barbados and St. Vincent. But when he was here, of course, he was always working. Oh, Lord, help me to say the right thing. But it was good. He was always a gentleman. He was always a gentleman. In Vermont, as the case was everywhere else, I never baptized folks, not many. I always call on someone else. In Brighton, I called on Brother Wharton when people would be baptized until Clayton came on the scene and he did the baptizing. In Vermont, I called on Clayton. I would take them either to the sea or to Kingstown, and Clayton will do all the baptizing. I don't know why I did that, but it was one of those things. You felt like somebody's life is in your hands, and it's difficult to think about you baptizing somebody, but I let others do it. So I didn't baptize many people, and I'm glad still, not for any other reason, but to say nobody will say that I'm a disciple of Glasgow. But that, yes, I was instrumental in a lot of people becoming Christians, but others did the baptizing. When we come into the end of our stay, we worship many different places. We worship at the lodge. Those of you remember the lodge, small building. We have some benches that couldn't hold up properly, but we worship there. Worship at our house. And then finally we saw, I think when Mr. Moses had a little building, just a little old shop. We asked him to sell us that building, and he did. And we went up there and we worshiped. And that's where we were until Dowers came on the scene and had that building moved to this spot. Vermont is still the very best place I have ever worked. It was difficult, but the way the people treated us, we were like kings in this little town. It was so wonderful. My wife and I keep talking about this all our lives, about the treatment we receive in this town. Our neighbors, Miss Lawrence and the Wiseman, and just about everyone up in the hill. Hardy, and what's his brother's name? That was hard. Appendix. Yeah. I'll tell you something else that happened. When we got a job in Kingstown and we didn't have transportation, Mr. Moses came to me. He said, Mr. Glasgow, I said, yes, sir. You can help me. I said, how? You drive my bus with the school kids to Kingstown, park the bus, you go to work. And in the evening, you pick the kids up and you come back. Didn't cost us a dime to go to work. Mr. Moses provided that. In a way, God blessed us with those privileges.
Now, I don't have the memory that he has. He has a serious memory. But nevertheless, I will go back as far as I can. First, I want to start with my conversion. Would that be all right? Yeah. And I will build up the tempo. Good. Brother Terry Thomas from Victoria Village. As a matter of fact, before him was Bob Brown. Bob Brown from Trinidad. My sister in Trinidad, we keep corresponding, and one time she told me, said, there was a guy who is preaching in Trinidad in our congregation, and I wanted to go to meet him because he's coming to St. Vincent. And that guy was this brother Bob Brown. So when I went to the meeting and I told her that describe the brother to her, only to understand that she was not a Christian, but yet she was sending me to this brother. Say, wow. So brother Terry Thomas from Victoria Village, I think it was Terry Thomas, I think but Glasgow and the Stallings. We had a meeting at Colbert. And myself and John Hazelwood went. Brother Thomas and I from the same village called Stubbs in the countryside. So I knew him very well. And so he invited me and I went there. And after the meeting, they approached me concerning becoming a Christian. Not that I wasn't ready yet, but I still wasn't ready. If you understand the saying. But eventually we made an appointment and we had some studies done. And they said it would be the gospel, and his name was Brother Sam Solin. It was Sam and Clayton. At the time they were meeting at the downstairs at Mrs. Wiseman. There was Joy and the three of us. We obeyed the gospel, we were baptized right at the, what you call that place below Victor, a guy bush there? In the river, anyway. Right after church, we went there and we were baptized there. So that's the beginning of the story. From there on, as Brother Glasgow said, I become involved in the work, keep going to Barbados and back and forth and so on. I think that was in 1972. It was in 1972. And I remember very well, it was the 10th of October. Always remember it. That was my spiritual birthday. And from then on, Brother Glasgow said to me, Brother Dowers, would you like to go to study the scriptures? And I gave into it. Went to Puerto Rico and spent 3 years there, from 1973 to 76. But before that, I had my eyes on a lady. Don't even think about it. So I left her in the care of this gentleman here. I could trust him very well. And the rest is history. The rest is history. Too long to go there. But nevertheless, we spent, she spent 2 years, and I spent 3 years. Came back in 1976, July around there. At that time, Brother Glasgow was working between Kingstown and Vermont. And it was very difficult for him. But I came back with the intention to be in the hot seat. I didn't have to come back, but I told the brother in Puerto Rico, listen, I promised my brother in St. Vincent I'd be going to return and work with the church there, and I want to keep the promise. And so I did. So from 1976, don't remember exactly the day, Brother Glasgow went back to Kingstown and then decided to work here, continue from where he left off. He sowed a seed, and with God's help, I water it, and definitely God gave the increase. We had very difficult times. The building that he spoke about earlier at Vermont, I think Albert Bushy was the person who had that building, and I don't remember if it was, well, anyway, Hardy bought it from him. And as I said last evening, the time came when Hardy said he wants the spot. And so we approached myself and, well, as a matter of fact, the first person I was converted to Christ was this guy, Winston Hardaway, up there. I think he was the second. He was the second person. And there was, after Winston, you had Brother Dunbar, Elliot Dunbar. Then there was Brother Vincent Primus. But before those brothers, we had to bring the building down one Sunday. Well, not one Sunday, but yeah, they broke it down one Sunday. The guys in the village asked them to do that for us. And my father-in-law, Harold Williams, well, he knew his whereabouts. Get those guys and bought the building there. I think it was about a 12 by 16 built, 12 by 16. Not very long, not very large. We put it together. But then, as time goes on, we decided to add to it. But before we got the building, I went to Mrs. Samuel at Queensberry. We got a spot to rent, put down the foundation, and he worked the building on it. It was a pleasure doing that, in spite of the difficulties that we encountered. And over the years, as the brother said, we have gone from lamppost to lamppost. We have had meetings in Franceways, you name it, all over this place. Kitchhouse, Cleverly, all that kind of stuff. The walk from there on went on gradually, had its ups and downs. Folks were converted. But in spite of that, with Lord's help, we were able to stay there until I decided to move on, further on. Before all of that, we have Brother Dunbar. Brother Dunbar with Sister Howe, grandson. One time I saw him and I said to myself, I'm going to check that guy out. He used to wear locks. He used to wear locks. And I know, the locks, the guy with the locks don't want to talk about, so I didn't dwell on that. I was there for the Bible. All I want to know about this is that Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I was there to preach only Christ to Him. And after several studies and so on, we met. As I said, the time when we would meet you and we would not meet, and but I was determined to really see him through. I never asked him to cut his locks. But when he was baptized, we went to Table Rock. It was just the two, I remember somewhere it was the two of us. No? Help me out there, brother. Help me out, man. Help me out there.
It was a Sunday morning. Sunday.
Wasn't it, brother? Oh, okay. It was a Sunday.
The blue van when we went up. The whole of Frankfurt village came out.
Oh, yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, man. Couldn't believe that. I remember very well. Yes, sir. I told you got to help this guy out. Serious, They know who the guy was. I was talking about. And it was at Cornell. Gums. People on the hill. People around. And he was converted. I never asked him to cut his locks. But one thing I said to him, I said, Brother Dunbar, wouldn't it look strange that everybody in the building has haircut, and thing that, and I left it there. When he came to church today, everything was off. He was a gentleman, man. And the rest is history. The rest is history. But it was really fun. We had some good times, and I could say that I can't select brother Glasgow with all the good time he had, with all the food that he received and all that kind of stuff. That's okay, brother. I didn't jealous you. You know, God provided for us also in different ways.
Amen.
In different ways. The Lord never allow his people to go hungry. But one thing I can tell you is that there is not a person in Vermont who can accuse the church here that they have never heard the gospel. We have knocked every door. Rain or sun. Many were converted. Too many to mention. And many fell away. But the time came when I thought I had enough. When I said I had enough, I think I have done all I think I could do in this area, and decided to move on. But one thing I did decide is that I would never leave a work. I promised myself that, and I promised the Lord that I will never leave a work where I'm working until I find someone who is able and willing to take up that work. And the time came when Brother Dunbar was that person. And so as he said, he took up the work in 1992. I think from 94 is where I actually commit myself to commit myself to Beckley. But the work here was growing gradually, but it has its problems, having difficulties. But nevertheless, you can just do what you can and leave the rest to the Lord.
Thank you very much. To follow on the heels of these men is not something that is easy. And to have been a Christian for 37 years plus, it's a long time. And so to sit here and to remember a lot of the wonderful stories would take probably a longer time for me to tell you about some of these stories. I see Brother Albert jealous as usual with his shy, wry smile. You know, we have had some good times together. But if we turn back to retreat and the celebration here of 52 years in the life and work of the church at retreat, of which I have been a part of, as Brother Jaws mentioned, when I became a Christian and started worshiping, it was right here. And then like 3 years thereabout after, I started to work with Brother Jelliso because I was receiving training from him at his feet, like, you know, Paul at the feet of Gamaliel. And that is how Brother Dawes, to a certain extent, he sort of he didn't want to let go, but he said he thought that it would be in my interest if I go along with Brother Jelliso. And you know, this is something that characterizes Brother Dawes. His humility, his selflessness, his wisdom, and that is what makes him the person that he is, that so many people speak about. Having been the evangelist here for 26 years plus, in this November shall be 27 years, God spare my life. So, you know, I have a lot to say. I can say a lot. As to how to condense it, to give you the best out of it, it's my challenge right now. But having become a Christian in 1981, and Brother Dawes gave you a little bit of that, I lived in Barbados prior for about 5 years, 1976 to 81. I came back home just before St. Vincent and the Grenadines hosted their first one-day international at Arnisville. West Indies played England. You know, that time I loved cricket, listen to cricket. And I used to read my Bible. I used to listen to religious programs, that is in Barbados. And at that stage, I wanted to change my life. My mother was living in Barbados with whom I was living. She's here tonight. But my grandmother was here, and she was getting on in age. And I decided to quit my job. I told my mom I'm coming back home to take care of my grandmother. And God bless her soul, I was able to do that. She always used to say to me, look, police would come for you, and when you leave me and gone, and anything happened, police would come for you. And I think Sister Dawes could tell you a story that we were in the fields one day. I don't remember which day it was. It would either be Tuesday or Wednesday. Myself, my wife, Sister Charles, were you with us at that time? Marilyn Charles? You were not. But anyway, we got a call, and Sister Dawes, in her own way, knowing that my mom died, but she didn't want to sort of tell me that she died. But I sensed that my grandmother, sorry, had passed away. And so I then, when she started talking, I said, you're telling me that my grandmother is dead, right? She said, no, Brother Dunbar, what you know? And anyway, my wife and I left, and we decided to come down, and she was dead. But we were able to get her to obey the gospel before she died. Brother Dawes was the one who baptized her. She was coming to the worship service. And then Sister Hackshaw, remember Sister Hackshaw? We baptized Sister Hackshaw one day. And then she said, but why you couldn't tell me that you all were going to baptize Sister Hackshaw? I had no idea that she wanted to be baptized. So I said, well, what do you want? What did you want? And then she said, well, I want to be baptized too. But she wanted to be baptized along with someone. So she was baptized. No, brethren, when I became a Christian in 1981, as Brother Dawes said, I had some challenges. People didn't believe that I would make it. Some thought that I came into the church because I saw some lady. I married a lady from the church, but we are from this village. I was born here, raised here, but I don't think I knew her. And that's my dear wife, Yvonne Dunbar. Uh, she would say the same thing. She didn't know me either. And boy, anyway. So after I became a Christian, the following Sunday, because I was baptized March the 22nd, after the service at retreat that Sunday morning, Brother Dawes said the building was 12 by what? When I checked back the notes from the plan that we had and so on, it was 10 feet 9 inches one way and 10 feet the other way. That building. I have the documents there. No, sir. I have it there. We didn't move a board. Neither out nor in. Right here. So yeah, it's there. As you left it, so we kept it. That is to tell you, I often tell brethren how small that building was. The next Sunday, after I was baptized, the next Sunday, lo and behold, you know what Brother Dawes did? Did this thing to a lot of folks, a lot of his converts. He said, you have to come and lead in prayer. Throughout my life walking here with him, as he was the evangelist, he would always tell me, you must be prepared. You must be prepared. All of these vehicles, they were not around. He had a blue van, and I don't know if you named it that way, but we named it Rocklin Helicopter. Bumpy T. Well, we changed it to Rocklin Helicopter. It was an English-made van. What it was, Austin or Morris? A Morris. And, he provided transportation for the church. He was the driver. There was a sister who fell ill, and it was found out that she had cancer. And so sometimes, I remember at least one occasion, Brother Dawes came, worship service was in progress. One family member came and said, look, Mama is not feeling well, and we'd like you to take her to the hospital. Brother Dawes said, I got to take Sister OJs to the hospital. So I always tell you, be prepared. I had to be the preacher that morning, you know. I had to be the preacher that morning, but I don't regret it. I try to pass the same on to the young men. Always be prepared. That's him. Be prepared. So here, and he invited Brother Albert Jellison to come to retreat because there were a number of young people, as you heard, and young men, Brother Duncan, myself, a couple others, deceased Noel O'Neill, and Brother Jellison started to teach us the Bible, and he did homiletics with us, and tried to do some hermeneutics also. And that's how I latched on to him. Brother Duncan, Thaddeus Duncan, he was doing mechanics, and he decided when the opportunity came, because in those days, the schools of preaching, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, and Trinidad would always send and to get, to recruit students for each year. And he took the opportunity. He went. I wanted to take the opportunity, as I said last Sunday. But in the wisdom of the late Bill Muse, one of the elders of the church at Bel Air, which now evolved into the church at Cedar Lane, he and I was married. We got married. My wife and I got married in 1985, and he came here in 1991, 92, thereabout. And so that was like 7 years down the road. And I was seriously thinking about going to Jamaica School of Preaching to see him, I don't know. And others, because Claudius Davis, he went there. So many, I think Brother Vernon Scott went there. So I wanted to, but he said to me, Brother Bill Muse, who was one of the elders, he said, except your wife is going to go with you, because I was thinking about going alone and leave her here. He said, I won't advise that. I took his advice, and so I forgot about going to the School of Preaching. And with the help of Brother Jellison and God's help, and other brethren, Glasgow from time to time when he came, Brother Claudius Davis and others, and the Don Starks and the Jerry Humphreys, these American brethren who came and did, leadership workshops and so on and so forth. I benefited from what they did, and that is why I am where I am. Now, working with Jellison on the Leeward Coast from say 83, and I like what Sister Dawes said, and I want to let a lot of you folks know that preachers are a special breed. You agree with me, gentlemen? We are, and faithful and dedicated preachers. Let me say it again. And you young women and wives who want a preacher, realize you're going to marry a special breed. During the time before I started to go to Leeward with Brother Albert Johnson, I'll get to retreat. I was up and down all over the place, everywhere. Those were the glory days of the church in terms of, as you heard, gospel meetings, pot meetings, all over. Let me just think here. Julie Miller film strips. Folks there were no televisions and iPad and all this kind of thing. And folks would come out, bring their chairs and a good night and Brother Dawes, and they would just sit around and so on. They didn't have the telephones and all this kind of thing with this Blue Flystone, Colbert, that's up Vermont. I can remember Bottom Kittles, Dubois, Penniston number 8. We said that retreat. And folks used to come out and they would sit and they would listen. I retraced all of those steps. Yes, come in, Sister Dawes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. And you forget my wife, right? Don't forget her. Right. Right. So back to this. I haven't lost my point. Preachers are a special breed. So I started going up and down wherever, Beckway as a young man. And I remember there was a couple who used to come from Let me tell you the names so that you might be able to help me if I mistake where they used to come from. I don't remember if it's Alabama, but it was Ken and Norma Adams. He was an elder in the congregation where he was at. And I went, they came to Beckwith several times, right, Brother also? Worked down there. And one time when he went back, he got the congregation, I wasn't married yet, to send me a $50 check. Okay? And that was helpful because I had a job and then I gave up the job. I had a job, I gave it up, and I started going along with them. Jelly so recognized my interest and my value to him. He decided to ask what is now Cedar Lane, but they were before Bel Air Church of Christ. And one day he came up, it was like weather like now, it was warm, hot, and he came up, drove up to Retreat. I'm living up there, and he said, look, I have some good news for you. I have some good news for you. He was able to persuade Cedar Lane to start supporting me financially as I work with them. Guess how much they started me with? I don't really think of that. $100. So that was 150. That's before I got married, Sister Dawes. When I got married, it was at 150. And like for you and Brother Dawes, after we got married, they increased it a little bit. And then with time, the 50 US from Ken and Norbert, they got old and I guess no more influence in the church where they were. That went. So my wife and I, we had some hard times, we had some difficult times. But when we came here at Retreat as the full-time minister, just like Brother Glasgow said, and even till today, members of the church and some who are not members of the church, they will give foodstuff, they will give money sometimes, they will give their blessing and their love. And so sometimes when we're thinking about going to buy or we need this or we need that, maybe carrots or planting, a sister, or family or brother would just send or come and bring those things. When we had our children really small, very young, I was still working on the Leeward Coast. There's a family here, they would not want me to mention their names. But we had real difficulties because at this time we were in rent. The rent was not much. The gentleman who owned the house, he was favorable to us. And, you think about having to pay, even how much we used to pay at the outset when we rented at Chauncey. $100 and something, and we were just getting like $250 or somewhere around there. Yeah, brethren. Yeah. And he left the phone in the house and we tried to keep it up. But folks would bring, and this family, sometimes we needed diaper for the children because Pampers wasn't really the in thing then. And the husband, he will just come and as his great smile is, and I mean, no matter what you say to him, he would be there and he would say, look, I bring this, you call his wife name. He said, she asked me to bring these things. And God bless them. And they're a wonderful family in the Lord's church. And it's not just to me, but members, say if we were to call their names, which I would not, they will get up and they will attest to it. Okay? So we started the work here in 92 after Brother Dawes decided I'm going to leave Retreat. He came, as I said, and it was sometime in maybe late 91, 92 for sure. And he said, look, I'm thinking about leaving Retreat. Would you like to take up the work there? I had no experience in working on my own, work with a congregation on my own. And so I discussed it with my wife, mentioned it to Brother Jelliso, and I also mentioned it to my supporting congregation back then, Bel Air. And they had no problem in supporting me because sometimes some congregations, if the preacher leaves an area or church that they're supporting, he leaves that support there. He goes on his own. We couldn't do that, right? Retreat couldn't support us. And we needed financial support because I saw it then as my work. And so they decided, yeah, we will support you at Retreat. and we heard about Cedar Lane. Until now, 26, 27 years after, they're still supporting us here. One sister wrote them a couple of years ago, maybe over a decade ago, and said, you all need to support the Dunbar family with a little bit more. They need it. Those are folks who get close to us and see how we struggle financially. But God has blessed us tremendously. He has blessed us tremendously. I can tell you that. My wife and I, our children. And I said to that sister, because she did it in a way, she kind of mentioned it, but I didn't know that she was really going to do it. And I said, how dare you do that? You know, I didn't want you to do that. Well, she did it, and she did it out of love. That's another wonderful sister in the Lord's church. So we came here and we started working, recognized some of the problems that we inherited. Lots of young people get into the age and stage in their life where unmarried, and it's a challenge there. And so it was really rocky for the congregation at that time. Anyway, we decided that we are going to try to do our best. We recognized that one of the weaknesses in the congregation at that time was that members of the church did not take the worship service on the Lord's Day seriously. They were forsaking the assembling of ourselves. I think brethren who were here back then could attest that has borne fruits. Right, Brother Norris Duncan? That has borne fruits. Based on what he told me recently. And I encourage preachers to identify weaknesses in the congregation and deal with it based on and according to the Bible, like our brother did last night. Don't take it for granted. And so we walk from there and we begin to develop. My son is saying that's enough. And you have seen that the walk, with God's help, fine and wonderful brethren here who have supported me. We have had our ups and our downs. There were times when I felt like just leaving retreat. Initially, I wanted to spend only 6 or 7 years here and was working toward having, the kind of leadership here according to the scriptures, having men appointed as elders, having deacons and leave the congregation scripturally organized. It didn't work out that way. That's why I'm still here today. There are many, many more stories we can tell you, but because of time, I cannot go into all of them. We want to let you out earlier tonight, but certainly you can tap into our experiences, our knowledge, etc., etc. The building attests to itself. Our membership here is in 60 plus. We have a consistent attendance at worship service. We at times would average over 15 in Bible studies on Wednesday evening when we do Bible studies. When we have prayer meeting, again, it is, pretty good. We have to work on it, but we believe that if members are going to be pleasing to the Lord, grow their faith, grow in their service and their work, yes, they have to take assembling ourselves together seriously, according to what God says in His Word. Otherwise, we are not going to move. We are not going to go anywhere. We're not going to get anywhere. I thank you very much. I hope I was able to say enough to you. My wife may not want to say anything, but those are some of the things, and that's where we came from. As to where we are now and where we shall go, that is something that we would like to get you in on.